Hello and welcome to Fight News Now. I'm your host, John Pollock. We have a lot coming up over the next hour. I'm going to be chatting with John Ramdeen and Robin Black about Ronda Rousey's very revealing interview that she just had with Ellen DeGeneres. Robin Black is going to be diving deep into that particular story. We'll also announce some new fight announcements. Wanderlei Silva appeared in front of the Nevada Athletic Commission, and we finally have some resolution in regards to his case. As well, you're going to hear from former Bellator light heavyweight champion Emmanuel Newton, who will return on Friday night in a rematch with Linton Vassell at Bellator's card coming up in Houston, Texas. We're also going to be looking at Sunday's UFC event from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It's a loaded edition of Fight News Now, and it all begins now. We are here with John Ramdeen and Robin Black to chat about all of today's news. Off the top, we are discussing Wanderlei Silva, who appeared in front of the Nevada Athletic Commission and getting somewhat of a resolution to his ongoing case. Of course, he had evaded a test in mid-2014, was told you would never be licensed to fight here again. Now he has been told no fine, but it will be a 3-year suspension retroactive to 2014, meaning if he wants to fight in a commission state, he's going to have to wait till June of next year.
Yeah, I think that's fine for Wanderlei Silva. I think over the years we've heard many fighters who have been laid off for a couple of years due to injury, but because they have such a brand, Wanderlei Silva being one of those, he can earn money by teaching seminars, traveling the world. He's doing this thing, this fan fest with Bellator, and I think to think about an opportunity for Wanderlei Silva to get back into the cage, most likely the Bellator cage, happening sometime next summer. I think it's interesting and it's something for Wanderlei Silva to work towards.
The question I would have for them, now also, first off, remember when the Nevada State Athletic Commission would just walk around saying things like, you're banned for 10 years, or you're banned for life, Wanderlei? They kind of eased back off that after a little public outcry. They woke up and realized, oh yeah, right, we're kind of being jerks about all this. There's a right amount and there's an overdoing it amount. And they were spending a lot of time at the overdoing amount. This feels right. 3 years, a long time. And retroactively, he has already served some of that. My big question now would be, if he goes over to Japan and fights in 2 months or 5 months or 6 months, will that affect this? Will they go back? It should, right? So this should keep Wanderlei from fighting for a year, but get him back at least having a date on a calendar and an opponent where he can go back and look forward to fighting.
And I would imagine, especially given the recent signings of Quentin Jackson and the relationship Scott Coker has with Fedor Emelianenko, and they're teasing that fight with Fedor and Wanderlei Silva, as you pointed out, you know, you have a date marked on the calendar. Let's work toward these things. Get this year under your belt, and then you can start making some real money, get that exposure out to the fans.
I would feel, even if you're Bellator and Wanderlei Silva were to go to Rizin, the fact that there is a loose promotion, co-promotion, at least with Bellator and Rizin, I think that would reflect very badly on Bellator, and I'd be very surprised if Wanderlei Silva went that route to go fight elsewhere. I mean, it's probably not his ideal length of time. I'm sure he was hoping that it would be a 2-year suspension and he could fight this summer, but that's not the case, and I think it would be a pretty reckless move to just go fight somewhere else. Unless he looks that, hey, this is a small window of time and I'm just going to go out there and maybe I can get a few more fights, make some money, and I'll just fight internationally.
I think he would have done that already. If that was the case, you know, you mentioned...
Well, he had the UFC contract as well that was handcuffing him for this time as well.
I think at this point, Wanderlei Silva will talk to the people like Scott Coker and say, what's best for both of us? How can we both benefit from this relationship? And Coker will tell him the truth. Sit on the suspension. We'll be able to get a number of high-profile fights for you in summer of 2017. Take your time, do whatever you need to make sure you're going to pass whatever tests come your way moving forward, and focus on getting back to fight shape.
Wanderlei was one of the most beloved characters ever of all time. And weirdly, over the last couple of years, Chael Sonnen pushing the buttons weird, and Ultimate Fighter Brazil show here, and a drug test run out there, and all of a sudden he's taking a hit. And I know, the little bit we know Wanderlei, you can really tell that how people view him and that fan support and the audience loving him has been a big part of what motivated him. So you hope for him that he gets back to doing that.
Let's discuss a bit about Ronda Rousey. Of course, she appeared in an interview with Ellen DeGeneres and talking as openly as she has regarding the loss to Holly Holm. And of course, what's getting all of the attention are her comments regarding having these suicidal thoughts immediately after the fight backstage. And now everyone is trying to analyze what all of this means. I mean, I'm not going to play amateur psychologist here. This is also a woman that had just got knocked out. This was immediately after the fight. And that interview, I mean, she flat out says she is determined to fight again. She wants to fight Holly Holm and be the one to beat Holly Holm. But nonetheless, it's concerning to people to hear these comments from an athlete. And Robin, I know you can speak firsthand to kind of the reaction to such a loss, no matter what stage you're competing on.
That's the thing. It's like, depends how honest you want to be. And, you know, you grab 100 fighters and you talk to them, you're going to find 5 or 10 of them that will say they felt that way. I can tell you that there was a loss that I definitely felt like my whole world was gone. And the hardest I've ever cried in my lifetime was on the telephone to my wife the next morning. And that's real. And that would be real for 5% of fighters or 10% of them.
Maybe more.
Yeah. Maybe more, because what you're asking for is somebody to, 1, identify how they felt, and 2, tell you how they felt. And not everybody wants to say that. Showing signs of weakness, look at how people react. Yeah. One thing she can take from all this is when you go out and you show your frailty, fragility that we kind of all have, and you talk openly about something that's incredibly painful, and somebody still wants to jump all over you or make fun of you or, you know, poke you when you're down, at least she can know these are people that are a little less evolved. These are people that have very little meaning to her life, and she can just shove that past, because it can be an incredibly painful thing. And I don't think she's the only fighter who would admit that if talking to somebody close to them. She might be a very rare one that might admit that to Ellen. But, you know, I don't think she's alone in that.
I don't think, you know, on a smaller scale to this, I think that people don't always appreciate that you're rank and file fighter in the UFC. I mean, for people out there to imagine their job, they go and have a bad day at work, it's a bad day at work. But to be told in 3 months, you are going to have a performance review that's going to encompass 15 minutes, and you are going to have to work for 3 months to prepare for those 15 minutes, and your job's also on the line in those 15 minutes, where if you have a bad performance review, you're going to be cut. And that could affect your family, that affects your finances. I mean, the amount of stress that is put onto just one singular night, it's the fact that there is not more stress-related issues that we hear in the sport. I think a lot of it is hidden amongst fighters.
Yeah, and that's why I think with that interview with Ellen DeGeneres that we got to see the range of emotions from Ronda, saying, you know, dealing with the dark times, and then thank God she had, you know, Travis there to, you know, pull her out of that dark spot, and then thinking about getting back on the horse, because it's all just things that you have to deal with throughout your professional career.
I do like the way you put that, though, Pollock. It's like, think of everything you've been working for, all feeling the next day while you're in a lot of pain, or that day, that it's all just collapsed and the whole thing is gone. You feel like you have nothing.
We move on to a few fights that are being announced. We've got Antonio Rogerio Nogueira, who's going to be back in action, taking on Pat Cummins. Combat reporting that out of Brazil. That is being targeted for the UFC 198 card at 205 pounds. We haven't seen Nogueira since last summer at the UFC 190 pay-per-view event. And taking on Pat Cummins, obviously a very tough wrestler for Nogueira to meet. And I think that this is going to be a very, very tough fight for Nogueira in May.
Yeah, I think when you look at the 205-pound division, this is the lower end of 205 pounds in the UFC, being at the highest level. Now, this section of the light heavyweights have to sort themselves out, and we've seen what Nogueira is capable of throughout his career. I just don't know if he can match what we're seeing from the 2016 wrestle boxers. We know he's talented with his hands. We know he's got jiu-jitsu, but it's the grinding fighters, and Pat Cummins is one of these guys that can get the job done.
It's a real scary thing to look and see how long some of these guys have fought. That's something we didn't even talk about with Wanderlei coming back at this stage. We're going back to early Pride in that whole Wild West era. These guys' bodies have not, you know, they have taken things that we can't even comprehend. And when Pat Cummins is sort of, you know, he's in his 30s, but he's in a way physically young and strong.
But would he say, however, though, so yeah, I understand these guys are pioneers, they've been through this stuff, but they haven't even come close to going through the grind of that us wrestlers have gone through on the mat.
Different grinds for sure, man. Different grinds. A grind of science and drive and technique, and a grind of heart and desire and fighting through the fire. They're different ones. But, you know, this one's an important one for Nogueira. The last few of an older guard of great fighters, and he needs to win fights like these, and they don't get any easier.
The next Fox card is going to be April the 16th. We've got a pair of fights announced, including 2 tough winners in the past. Cesar Ferreira taking on Kyle Magalesh, and we're also going to see tough Season 11 winner Court McGee in action as he takes on Santiago Ponzinibbio, who looked tremendous with his striking in his last fight. McGee had taken that big 2-year layoff and then returned. I think that this is a really fun matchup involving those 2 welterweights.
Yeah, well, we were in Vegas to see Ponzinibbio's fight, and we all expected a certain performance from him, but I think he exceeded everybody's expectations. And if this is what we're going to see from him moving forward, I think most fans, casual or hardcore fans, are going to like what they've seen from him.
Those casuals.
Those casuals is the truth.
He did have a great performance, and you know, you have to now. You know, there's so many fights, there's so many shows, and there's so many fighters that you have to have these breakout ones. And guys are changing, guys are evolving. And Stephen Thompson can have a fight on one night, and the whole game looks different. You have to be having big nights.
If you remember, Gabriel Gonzaga was also on that card, and he did not have a great night.
Also, Gleison Tebow, he is not going to be contesting his drug test failures, and I say plural because he's of the impression he's going to probably get a 2-year suspension. There were 2 tests. One was in competition, one was out of competition. He did come out with a statement acknowledging that he did take EPO, but stating that he is saying, I did it out of competition and didn't feel that he did anything wrong in his mind, even though this is a banned substance in or out of competition. The fact there are 2 failures, he might be in for a surprise as to what he gets, but stating that, listen, I'm not going to be able to afford the lawyers to fight all this, the court battles, and I'm going to likely accept a 2-year suspension as a result, but it could be more.
Yeah, if it's 2 years, you know, as guys get a little bit older like that, they can look at it and go, you know, hey,
I need a break.
Yeah, I need a break. You know, the welterweight champion of the world, Robbie Lawler, he's back for a little bit of time. And then when, hey, man, I'm incredibly skilled. My body is healed. I'm ready for one more run at it. Maybe that's the thinking of a guy like this.
26 fights for Gleison Tebow in the UFC since 2006. We have the preview show coming up on Saturday, February the 27th, as we count down to Anderson Silva's return as he takes on Michael the Count Bisping, and that main card will be airing here in Canada on Fight Network.